That night, I deliberately turned off the bedroom light earlier than usual, leaving only the dim glow from my phone screen. I had grown used to the silence since my rented room was on the second floor of an old building, a little separated from the other rooms. The sound of crickets outside the window was clear, sometimes mixed with the faint roar of a passing motorbike on the narrow street. Everything felt ordinary until I suddenly sensed something strange that night. From the corner of my eye, I noticed a peculiar reflection on the glass window behind the thin curtain. At first, I thought it was just my own shadow, but the shape was far too tall, too vague, and it seemed to move slowly on its own. I sat upright on the mattress, trying to be sure of what I saw. My phone was still in my hand, its screen casting a sharp light, and on the glass I could see the silhouette of myself clearly. Yet, right behind that silhouette, another shadow appeared. It towered nearly twice as tall as a normal person, its head bowed slightly as if it was staring at me. Its hair was long, spilling down over its chest, obscuring its face entirely. I blinked hard, assuming it was just an illusion brought by fatigue. But the longer I stared, the more vivid and undeniable the form became, as though someone truly was standing right behind me inside the room. My heart pounded as I whipped my head around quickly, hoping for a logical explanation, but all I saw was the bare wall, a small study desk, and the cabinet in the corner. There was no one there. I let out a hollow laugh, trying to calm myself. Maybe just the streetlight from outside, I muttered, though I knew that outside was only darkness with a single lamppost far down the alley. When my eyes shifted back to the window, the shadow was still there. Worse, it seemed closer than before, as if it had moved in sync with the turn of my head. The air in my chest grew tight, sweat trickling down my temple, even though the night air was cool. I felt a gaze burning into my back, raising goosebumps across my skin. I tried closing my eyes for a few seconds, hoping it would vanish once I reopened them. But when I did, the shadow had not gone. This time, however, its head was slightly raised, revealing the faint contour of a pale face, lips parted in what looked like a thin, sinister grin. My throat locked, and I couldn't move an inch. It was as if my body was chained to the spot. Strange noises began filling the room. A faint scraping sound, like long nails dragging across the glass, though my window was tightly shut. Then a whisper seeped through the air, too soft to make out words, but clear enough to send a piercing ring into my ears. I instinctively clamped my hands over them, nearly dropping my phone. Yet the sound seemed to grow nearer, as though it wasn't coming from outside at all, but from inside the room, from right behind me. My heart thundered, and I dared not look back. I forced myself to fight the fear by pretending to be brave. I muttered half-formed prayers under my breath, pushing myself to think rationally. Maybe I was tired, maybe the shadow was just a trick of the light, but my body betrayed me. My hands shook uncontrollably, my throat was parched, and an icy shiver ran down my spine. When I lifted my phone and directed its glow toward the glass, the reflection became sharper. I could see it, a tall figure, with its long hair covering most of its face, standing so close it looked only a few inches behind me. Reflexively, I let the phone slip from my grip, the screen fading to black, leaving the room drowned in heavy darkness. Strangely, even without light, the silhouette on the glass didn't disappear. It seemed to glow faintly from within itself, requiring no reflection to be seen. My breath quickened, my lungs aching as if the air had thinned to nothing. I lowered my head and squeezed my eyes shut, praying it would all fade. But then a cold breath grazed the back of my neck, so real, so close, as if someone truly stood there. I forced myself to glance back once more, and for a split second I saw it. No longer in the mirror, but inside the room. Its hair fell over its face, its pallid features peering from behind my shoulder with hollow, empty eyes staring straight into me. I tried to scream, but the sound was swallowed, strangled in my throat by the suffocating weight of the room. I stayed awake until late that night after the incident, too terrified to close my eyes. My phone lay on the floor, the screen dark, but I was too afraid to bend down and pick it up. The room was utterly silent, yet the silence itself felt oppressive, as if something unseen was hiding in it. The air was unnaturally cold, far colder than it should have been. Every time I tried to steady my breathing, I felt as though another set of lungs were drawing breath just behind me, syncing perfectly with mine. I didn't know what to do, whether I should run out of the room or force myself to endure it. After several tense minutes, I forced myself to grab the phone. Its screen lit up when I tapped it, the glow feeling like the only shield I had against the darkness. I cast the light into every corner of the room, making sure nothing was hiding. Everything looked normal, just a pile of books on the desk, the wardrobe, and an empty chair. But the longer I shone the light around, the more I felt that this normal was only a mask. It was as though something was waiting, deliberately hiding in the shadows, staring at me from where my light could never reach. I tried distracting myself by scrolling through social media, convincing myself this was all in my head. But after only a few seconds, my phone froze. The screen went black, even though the battery was still full. At that exact moment, the glass window in front of me began to fog up, even though it wasn't raining and the air outside was dry. On the surface of that glass, something slowly began to form. Letters, drawn as if by a finger scraping through the mist. My eyes widened in disbelief. The words became clear. I am here. My blood felt as though it had stopped flowing. I leapt up from the mattress, backing away from the window. Yet as if the glass itself was alive, the fog grew thicker and more words appeared. Do not look behind you. My body shook violently. The message felt like both a warning and a command, and the most terrifying part was that I didn't know whether to obey it or not. My hands trembled as I covered my face, fighting the tears that threatened to fall. The pounding of my heartbeat was so loud it echoed inside my ears. The urge to turn around grew stronger, though I knew I shouldn't. I could sense something standing right behind me, so close that its icy presence seeped into my skin. I gripped the mattress tightly, forcing myself not to move. But suddenly, a whisper brushed against my ear. It was raspy, deep, and so real it felt like someone's lips were pressed against me. The voice murmured softly, "Why do you keep looking at the glass when I'm right behind you?" I screamed and bolted from the mattress, rushing to the door and fumbling with the lock. But the key jammed, though it had never given me trouble before. I yanked and twisted the knob again and again, but the door would not budge. At the same time, slow footsteps began to approach from behind, the wooden floor creaking under their weight. I dared not turn around, staring at the door with all the desperation I could muster. But the steps drew closer and closer until I could feel the vibrations beneath my feet. Finally, the door burst open with a violent slam as if something had shoved it from the outside. I stumbled out in panic, nearly tripping as I pushed myself into the corridor. The boarding house was empty, the dim neon bulb overhead flickering weakly. My breath came in sharp gasps, my heart hammering wildly. I turned back, praying I'd see nothing. But through the half-open door of my room, I saw it again. The figure stood inside, right by the window, but this time its head was turned directly toward me. Its smile stretched wider, its eyes hollow, and for the first time I was certain, whatever it was no longer just a shadow. I stood frozen in the dim hallway, my chest heaving as if I had just run a marathon. The flickering neon bulb above buzzed faintly, casting sharp shadows along the cracked walls. My eyes remained locked on the half-open door of my room. The figure inside hadn't moved, but the longer I stared, the more its presence pressed down on me. I wanted to scream for help, but my voice refused to rise. The boarding house was eerily quiet. Every other room seemed empty, as though I were the only soul left in the building. That silence felt unnatural, like the entire place was holding its breath. I forced myself to look away, convincing myself to run. My bare feet pounded against the cold tiles as I rushed toward the stairwell, but each step felt heavy, as though invisible hands were trying to drag me back. Halfway down, the bulb on the ceiling began to flicker wildly, then shattered with a loud pop. Darkness swallowed the hall, and I stumbled in panic. In that moment of blindness, I heard it again, the sound of slow footsteps. They weren't coming from behind anymore. They were coming from ahead, echoing up from the bottom of the stairs, waiting for me. I froze, trapped between two choices: go down and face whatever waited below, or turn back toward the room where the figure had appeared. My body trembled uncontrollably. I pressed myself against the wall, straining my ears. The footsteps below ceased, but I could still hear faint breathing, uneven and ragged, filling the stairwell. I took one step back, then another, retreating toward the hallway, and as I turned, my stomach dropped. At the far end of the corridor, the figure was already there. Its long hair swayed as if caught by a breeze, though the air was completely still. I staggered backward, my mind racing, desperate for an escape. My eyes darted toward the window at the end of the hall. Without thinking, I sprinted toward it, hoping I could pry it open and climb out. But as I reached it, I realized with horror that the glass was no longer reflecting the hallway. Instead, it was showing me my own room, the bed, the desk, and, standing directly in the middle of it, the figure staring straight at me. My reflection wasn't in the glass at all, only the figure's pale, distorted face smiling wider than before. A wave of nausea hit me as the window began to ripple like water, the figure inside moving closer, pressing its hands against the glass from the other side. Its hollow eyes seemed to glow faintly, and for the first time, its mouth opened wide. The sound that followed wasn't a scream, but something worse, a deep guttural groan that seemed to come from everywhere at once. My ears rang violently, and I stumbled back, clutching my head. The lights above sparked, then went out entirely, drowning everything in black. In the pitch dark, I could hear it moving closer. Not from the window, not from the stairs, but from every direction at once. My breath quickened, my pulse thundering in my throat. Something icy brushed against my hand, then my shoulder, then the side of my face. I lashed out wildly, swinging at nothing, but the air itself felt heavy, pressing down on me. And then, right beside my ear, a whisper returned. The same voice as before, only clearer this time. "You can't leave. This is my room now." I collapsed to the floor, curling against the wall, my body trembling violently. For a moment I thought I would lose consciousness, But then, just as suddenly as it started, everything went silent. The lights flickered back on, the hallway empty once more. My room door was closed tightly, the window just a plain pane of glass. I scrambled to my feet and fled down the stairs without looking back. That night, I never returned. I left everything I owned behind in that room. And to this day, whenever I catch my reflection in a dark window, I still half expect to see it standing behind me. That night, I was sitting alone in my room, staring at my phone screen flickering with mundane notifications. The silence felt heavier than usual, a strange presence pressing against the walls, making the air thick and chilling. My hand trembled as I held the glass of water on the table, trying to calm myself. Suddenly, my phone vibrated violently, signaling an incoming call. The number flashing on the screen froze my blood. It was my friend's number, the one who had died 3 days ago in a tragic accident. My heart raced uncontrollably, the room spinning slightly as I stared, unable to believe my eyes. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the answer button, feeling like I was about to summon something that should have remained buried. Yet, curiosity and worry pushed me forward, and I pressed the green button. On the other end, there was only heavy breathing, uneven and ragged, making me want to scream. I tried calling his name, asking if it was really him, but there was no response, only that harsh, labored breathing. The atmosphere in the room thickened, as if the air itself had turned dense and cold, pressing into my bones. I tried to steady my breath and think rationally. Maybe someone was playing a cruel prank with his old number, or perhaps it was a wrong call. But the sound was unmistakable, too familiar to be a mistake. I could recognize the pattern of breathing instantly. It wasn't like the breath of a living person, too heavy, too slow, with a hint of stifled sobbing. Slowly, I began to hear faint, broken words. "Help, I'm so cold. It's dark here." The voice was fragile, pleading, and sent chills racing up my spine. My hand shook as I gripped the phone tighter. I wanted to hang up and run from the room, yet I couldn't tear my eyes away from the screen. The voice returned, clearer this time, and hoarse. "Don't leave me. I'm alone here." I could feel an icy pressure creeping down my back, though the AC was off. Everything around me felt alien, shadows seeming to shift in the corners of my eyes. I turned my head a few times, hoping it was just my imagination, but the room remained empty, only me and the voice on the line. I let out a soft scream and covered my ears, but the sound seemed to penetrate walls and my own throat. My breath was ragged, my heart pounding, as if it might burst. I tried asking his name again, desperate to know if this was real. Suddenly, a short, chilling laugh pierced the air, like someone trying to hold back grief and anger at once. The sound was deafening, and I felt an invisible, cold touch graze my shoulder. I spun around, but the room remained empty, only dark shadows moving slowly along the walls. I tried to end the call, but the buttons didn't respond. The phone kept vibrating in my grip, showing a blank screen and full signal. I pressed the power button, every other button, but it stayed locked in my hand. Panic surged through me. Had I done something wrong? Was my friend truly trying to contact me from the other side? Fear and confusion merged, making my vision blur, and cold sweat trickle down my temples. Seconds stretched into unbearable minutes. The breathing on the line grew louder, closer, as if it were right next to me, staring from the empty space behind me. I screamed as loudly as I could, but no sound came out. Then, one word, clear and piercing, escaped the line. "I don't want to leave." The next morning, even with the sun rising, I couldn't sleep. The fear from the previous night clung to me like a shadow, following every move I made. My phone stayed near my pillow, though I was terrified to look at its screen. Several times I tried to power it on, hoping everything would appear normal. But when I pressed the power button, the screen flickered briefly, then an incoming call appeared, again from that same number. My heart seemed to stop for a moment, my hand shaking uncontrollably. I stared at the screen, realizing this was no coincidence. I tried to recall the voice from the night before, the heavy breathing, the chilling laugh, the last words that had pierced my mind. I didn't know if it was real or just a product of trauma, yet curiosity overpowered my fear, and I pressed the answer button. This time the voice came immediately, clearer and closer, as if it was right next to my ear. "I don't want to be alone. Don't leave me here." My breath caught in my throat, goosebumps rose across my skin, and an icy chill seemed to envelope my entire body. I tried speaking, attempting to calm myself, telling it I would help, that I was there. But the voice began to change, growing raspy and horrifying, more like a scream than words. I felt movement behind me, something unseen, shifting in the room, brushing against the air with a cold, tangible presence. My stomach knotted, and I could barely turn my head without panic freezing my limbs. It was as though the space around me had become a living entity, pressing and twisting in ways that defied reason. The voice suddenly laughed, a short guttural sound, sending an icy shiver down my spine. I staggered back, clutching the phone as the laughter echoed in the room, seemingly bouncing off the walls. I wanted to drop the phone, run outside, scream, do anything, but my body refused to obey. The phone seemed alive in my hand, vibrating with a force that matched the terror building in my chest. Every second felt stretched into an eternity, the line between reality and nightmare dissolving. Then it spoke again, slowly, each word deliberate. "I cannot leave me. I am trapped, and so am I." My heart pounded harder, my vision blurred, and the room seemed to tilt slightly as if gravity had shifted. Shadows grew longer and darker in the corners, stretching unnaturally toward me. I tried to force rational thoughts, to convince myself this was a prank or my imagination, but the voice knew things it shouldn't. Details only my friend would know, secrets never shared with anyone else. My fear turned to cold, unrelenting dread. I dropped to my knees, still clutching the phone, desperate to escape the oppressive presence surrounding me. The voice grew louder, closer, like it had crawled inside the walls and was whispering directly into my soul. "Don't go, stay with me." The words repeated over and over until I could feel my mind bending under the weight of the sound. My body shook violently and the room seemed to darken further, as if the sunlight from outside had been swallowed by some invisible force. Finally, the call ended abruptly. The phone went black. Silence returned, but it was a silence that pressed against me, suffocating and thick. I collapsed to the floor, trembling, unable to process what had just happened. Deep down, I knew this was no ordinary call. Something had reached through that device, something from beyond, and it wasn't finished with me. Even as the morning sun brightened the room, I could still feel its presence lingering, like a shadow that refused to leave, waiting for the next call. That night, I decided not to touch my phone. Every sound in the room seemed amplified. The creak of the floorboards, the hum of the refrigerator, the soft rustle of curtains in the wind. I tried to convince myself it was just fear, that the call from that number was a cruel coincidence. But as darkness deepened, a new sound emerged, the unmistakable vibration of my phone, though I had left it untouched. My heart skipped a beat. Slowly, I dared to look at the screen. The same number flashed again, relentless. I hesitated, frozen, knowing I could not ignore it. Yet terror rooted me to the spot, unable to move. With shaking hands, I answered. Immediately, a whisper slithered into my ear. "You can't leave me. I'm still here." This time, the voice was stronger, almost corporeal, like something had stepped into the room behind me. I could feel a chill brush across my neck, as though icy fingers traced my spine. Panic surged as I realized the call was no longer just a voice over the phone, it was inside the room with me. I scrambled to the door, desperate to escape, but the handle wouldn't budge. It was as if some invisible force held the room together, trapping me. The voice grew louder, chanting my name, mixing whispers with faint laughter that twisted into something grotesque. Shadows in the corners began to stretch unnaturally, crawling along the walls, inching toward me. My breath came in ragged gasps, and the phone slipped from my hand, bouncing on the floor. Yet even lying there, black and silent, it seemed to pulse with energy, summoning that presence closer. Suddenly, a figure appeared at the edge of my vision, pale and distorted, half-formed yet terrifyingly real. Its eyes were hollow, and its mouth twisted into a grin I could not unsee. I froze, terror locking my limbs. The voice, now emanating both from the phone and the figure, repeated, "You cannot leave me. Stay." Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my body refused to obey. I realized the presence wasn't just my friend, it was something else. Something trapped between life and death, feeding on fear. Desperate, I grabbed a chair and swung it toward the figure. It passed through the air like smoke, yet the room seemed to react as though it had weight. The temperature plummeted, frost forming on the edges of the furniture. I screamed, the sound swallowed by the oppressive silence that followed. Then just as suddenly, the figure wavered, its form flickering, as if weakened by my desperate resistance. The phone slid across the floor and landed face up. On the screen, a single message appeared. "Thank you." Silence fell again, heavy and absolute. I sank to the floor, trembling, not daring to move for several minutes. The air no longer pressed down on me. The shadows receded. The room felt empty, normal. Yet I knew it was only a temporary reprieve. The presence had left, but it had not disappeared. It had touched my life, leaving a mark I could feel even in the warmth of daylight. My hand still shook as I picked up the phone, hesitant to look at the call log. The number was gone, as if it had never existed. When morning came, I left my apartment. I never answered that number again, and I deleted it from every device I owned. Yet even now, when my phone vibrates unexpectedly, I freeze for a moment, heart racing. I know deep down that it is not over, that something can still reach through the device, waiting for the next call, and I will never be truly alone. That number had called from beyond, and the memory of it lingers like a shadow in the corners of my mind, haunting every quiet night. That night, I intentionally passed by the old, abandoned boarding house, driven by curiosity after neighbors whispered about strange sounds coming from inside. The heavy front door creaked when I pushed it, yet it refused to open fully. The air around the building was unnaturally cold, sharper than a normal night, as if it were deliberately rejecting my presence. Though it made no sense, a strong urge pushed me to enter. Every step toward the main staircase felt like holding my breath, every old wooden plank groaning under my weight, sending long echoes through the dark, empty space. Once inside, the musty, dusty smell hit me immediately. Cracked walls seemed to stare back at me, and the streetlight filtering through the windows cast broken, strange shapes across the floor. I tried to calm myself, convincing that it was just an old building and the supposed sounds were nothing but imagination. Yet my careful steps started to feel odd, like the floor beneath me was vibrating faintly, and faint whispers came from the room above. I froze, holding my breath, trying to catch the words, but it only sounded like unintelligible murmurs mixed with the hum of the wind outside. I moved further into the building, switching on my phone flashlight. The small beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the old stairs leading to the second floor. Every step made a horrifying creak, and the higher I climbed, the clearer the whispers became. They sounded like they were calling my name softly, insistently, occasionally accompanied by faint knocks on the wall in rhythm with my own heartbeat. I began to feel that something was following me, unseen but real, watching my every move, waiting to reveal itself. When I reached the second floor, the air grew colder, so chilling I could see my breath forming thin clouds. The whispers were now much closer, as if coming from directly behind me. I turned down the long hallway, cracked walls appearing alive, shadows dancing across their surfaces. My heart pounded, but curiosity overpowered my fear. I stepped forward, increasing my flashlight's brightness. Suddenly, footsteps echoed above me, though no one else could possibly be in the building. The steps were heavy and deliberate, each one sending a terrifying echo down the dark hallway. I approached one of the rooms, a rotting wooden door slightly ajar, and saw a faint shadow inside. The whispers grew clearer, now forming short words. "Please don't leave." The voice made my hair stand on end. I felt an icy chill creeping down my spine, as if invisible hands were brushing my skin. Fear surged, but an odd compulsion urged me to look closer, to discover who or what was inside that room. I peeked carefully inside, and my eyes caught something that shouldn't have been there. A dark, tall, amorphous shadow stood in the corner, staring directly at me. Its hand seemed elongated, brushing the floor, and its head was faceless, turning as though aware of my presence. I froze, holding my breath, trying to catch the words, but it only sounded like unintelligible murmurs mixed with the hum of the wind outside. Panic peaked, and I backed away slowly, trying to remain calm. The shadow remained, watching me from the doorway. I could feel its gaze penetrating my skin, settling deep into my bones, and my heart seemed to stop for a moment. Without thinking, I turned and ran down the stairs, my footsteps blending with the mysterious echoes behind me. I burst out of the old building, gasping for breath, cold sweat dripping down my face, but the faint, mocking voices seemed to follow me, lingering from the darkness of that abandoned boarding house. The next evening, I found myself unable to stay away, despite the terror that had consumed me the night before. The memory of the faceless shadow haunted every corner of my mind, replaying its twisted grin and the echoing whispers. Curiosity, mingled with fear, compelled me to return. As I approached the building, the air grew unnaturally cold, my breath visible in faint clouds. The once quiet street now seemed charged with an unseen tension, and the shadows along the walls appeared to stretch and twitch as if alive. I pushed open the creaking door again, feeling the old wood resist me, as though it had grown sentient. Inside, the air smelled of decay and mildew, heavier than before, almost pressing against my lungs. I took cautious steps toward the staircase, flashlight in hand, illuminating the peeling paint and warped floorboards. Then, from above, the faint whispering began again, calling my name softly, almost pleadingly. My heart hammered, but I could not turn back. The sound drew me up the stairs, each creaking step echoing like a drumbeat through the empty hallways. Reaching the second floor, the whispers grew louder, blending with faint taps and scrapes against the walls. Shadows danced unnaturally across the corridor, forming shapes that seemed almost human, but not quite. I realized with a shiver that the noises were reacting to my presence, shifting and twisting as I moved. The cold intensified, wrapping around me like invisible hands, making my limbs heavy and slow. Every instinct screamed to flee, yet I felt trapped in a compulsion to uncover the source, to face whatever entity had followed me into this abandoned place. I approached the room where I had first seen the shadow. The door was slightly ajar, the darkness inside deeper than the hall. A low, guttural whisper called from within, almost coaxing me in. My flashlight beam fell across the corner, and there it was again, the dark, faceless figure, taller and more defined than I remembered. Its elongated hand rested on the floor, moving slightly as if sensing me. The air around it seemed to ripple, warping the faint light and casting eerie reflections across the walls. The whispers transformed into words I could almost understand. "You should not have come back." I stumbled backward, my mind racing, trying to rationalize what I was seeing. The figure did not move closer, yet its presence pressed against me, heavy and suffocating. A cold, unearthly wind swept through the corridor, carrying faint, unintelligible voices that swirled around my head. I could feel something brush past my shoulder, cold and intangible, sending shivers down my spine. Each attempt to step away seemed to draw the shadow into sharper focus, as if it thrived on my fear. Panic overtook curiosity as the whispers escalated into a cacophony of overlapping voices, shouting and laughing in ways that made no sense. The floorboards seemed to pulse beneath me, echoing the rhythm of my heart. I tried to call out, to demand it leave, but no sound came. The shadow moved slightly, its head turned toward me, and though faceless, I felt its gaze pierce me, scanning my mind in my fear. My flashlight flickered violently, and for a moment the shadow seemed to multiply, appearing in every corner, every shadowed hallway, surrounding me completely. With a surge of adrenaline, I bolted toward the staircase, tripping over warped boards and nearly falling. Behind me, the cacophony of whispers continued, echoing through the building with a maddening intensity. I burst through the front door, the cold night air hitting my face like a wave. The whispers faded slightly but did not disappear entirely, lingering in the distance, carried by the wind. My legs gave way, and I collapsed onto the street, gasping and shaking. I knew then that whatever haunted that abandoned boarding house had not let me go, and it was only a matter of time before it would call me back once more. That night, I swore I would not return, yet the compulsion gnawed at me relentlessly. Every quiet moment during the day felt haunted by the memory of that faceless figure and the endless whispers. As darkness fell, I felt an inexplicable pull toward the abandoned building, as if the shadows themselves were calling my name. The street leading to the boarding house felt colder, the wind sharper, and every shadow along the wall seemed to twitch with anticipation. My heart pounded, Yet I walked forward, compelled to face the entity that had haunted my dreams. I pushed open the heavy door once more, the creaking wood protesting my intrusion. Inside, the familiar smell of decay and mold greeted me like an old, sinister friend. The corridor was darker than ever, shadows clinging to every corner as though alive. Whispers started almost immediately, circling my head, fragmented words I could barely understand. You cannot leave. Stay. Forever. The cold was suffocating, wrapping around my body like a vice, making each step toward the staircase a monumental effort. As I reached the second floor, the shadows shifted violently, forming shapes that seemed to move independently of the dim light. I felt a presence behind me, cold and oppressive, and I dared not turn my head. The faceless figure appeared at the end of the hallway, taller, its hand elongated and reaching forward as if inviting me closer. Its whispers grew louder, now merging into an incomprehensible chant that vibrated through the floor beneath my feet. Fear froze me, yet an irresistible curiosity forced me forward, toward the door of the cursed room. I stepped inside, my flashlight flickering, illuminating the corner where the shadow loomed. It seemed more solid now, yet distorted, half-formed, like it existed between two worlds. The air vibrated with a low hum, and I could feel my own heartbeat echoing in my ears. The figure moved slightly, almost imperceptibly, its faceless head tilting as if observing every thought, every fear. You cannot leave. Stay. Forever. The whispers coalesced into a single voice, chilling and malevolent. The room seemed to close in on me, walls bending, shadows stretching to consume the light. Panic surged through me, and I turned to flee, but the door slammed shut with a deafening bang. The whispers exploded into a cacophony, surrounding me, pressing against my ears, mind, and soul. The figure advanced, its presence suffocating, freezing the air around me. My flashlight fell, spinning light across the warped walls, and for a moment it seemed the shadow had multiplied, filling every dark corner, every shadowed recess. I could feel invisible fingers brushing against my skin, icy and relentless as the chant grew louder, demanding I stay. Desperate, I lunged toward a cracked window, shattering it to escape. Cold night air hit me like a torrent as I scrambled through the broken glass onto the street below. The whispers faded slightly, but did not vanish entirely, drifting into the distance like ghosts carried by the wind. My hands and knees were cut, my body trembling violently, yet I was alive. The faceless figure did not pursue me further, at least not visibly, but I knew in my heart it remained, watching, waiting, tethered to the building and to me in some inescapable way. I never returned to that boarding house, and I avoid that street entirely, yet its memory lingers like a shadow at the edge of my vision. Even in the safety of my own home, I can feel it, a cold presence lurking in the corners, the faintest whisper carried on the wind. I have learned that some places do not forgive curiosity, and some voices do not fade, waiting patiently for the next soul, daring enough or foolish enough to listen. The abandoned boarding house stands silent in the night, yet I know it is alive with whispers, watching, and it will never truly let me go.